Let's be entirely honest, folks. If you haven't heard of Shrek at this point, then you've probably been living under a rock. With 4 main films, 2 spin-offs, 8 short films of various length, 3 TV specials, and 1 actual TV series, it's needless to say that this is a big franchise and probably DreamWorks' biggest overall. And for some reason, this big green ogre and his series have always kind of stayed with us since his release back in 2001. It was with the release of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and seeing just how good that film was, made me want to take another look at the original story and ask, just why was the original Shrek such a good movie? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. So let's get things straight first. There are a lot of reasons that I think Shrek is a good film, but the first one that I'm gonna have to guarantee that almost everyone is going to point to is the parody and irreverent content in this film. Poking fun at old fairy tales and making parodies of them was never something that was unique to Shrek and Friends. Cartoons have always done their own spin on popular stories, fairy tale or not, and movies have often tried to get themselves a fairy tale feel to various levels of success. This also goes along with the 2000s really being that era where making fun of old classics as well as just being rude or crude in general were really getting popular. But Shrek was one of the first big films to really do both, with its opening moments being the classic reading from the fairy tale book the story comes from, right before Shrek rips the page out about true love and uses it as toilet paper. It sets a tone from the very beginning of the film that we're not only not going to be doing the traditional fairy tale, but we're also going to be poking fun at them, but in a way you wouldn't expect. You see, a lot of movies that were making fun of well-known concepts or ideas, especially back in those days, usually did it as an insult. The whole, ha ha, look at this idea, isn't it so stupid that you ever were into this in the first place kind of deal. It's something that became increasingly more common over the years, where being cynical and jaded was considered popular and what made for good movies, which frankly I'm honestly sick of myself. Pointing at something and going, haha, this is dumb, isn't entertaining, original, or frankly even needed. Which makes it all the more interesting with the fact that Shrek actually never does it to this extent. While there are the occasional jabs or making fun of Disney here or there, most notably with Farquaad's Castle du Lac, it never feels like it's being made out of malice or to put down the original material. Instead, Shrek, as well as future films like The Last Wish, does something that I'm a little surprised hasn't been done as much before, and is something that still isn't done that well outside of this franchise, using the fairy tale world as a backdrop. You see, this is actually one of the other concepts that I feel really gives Shrek a lot of its staying power, and why other franchises or even sequels to Shrek, like Shrek 4, don't work. And that's the fact that this movie never takes its time to pause, sit back, and explain to you who these characters are and what you need to know about them. Fairy tale stories and nursery rhymes are an integral part of our culture, with these characters and ideas being told again and again to every kid born. By the time most kids hit the age where they would understand something like Shrek, they're going to be exposed to several different versions of the Three Blind Mice, Snow White, Peter Pan, and more. And because of that knowledge ingrained into our psyches the way it is, Shrek can use these characters in the background or for story elements without having to do any of the setup. It's why things like Gingy being tortured by Lord Farquaad work so well, because nearly everyone is at least aware of the gingerbread man, and the idea of him having his legs torn off, being unable to run like he's known for, does something you don't normally see, and probably wouldn't had this been a movie focused on the gingerbread man himself. And when the magic mirror is brought in, we immediately know the impact and power of what the mirror might be capable of because of our familiarity with Snow White. The fact that it's played for laughs makes it even funnier. And that's something that I've actually come to realize recently when it comes to trying to tell the same story again and again. It's something that I hit upon with my Muppet Christmas Carol video, but it didn't really click with me until I watched Del Toro's Pinocchio film. One of the problems in trying to retell a classic again, especially if it's been done over and over, is simply the fact that your audience is going to be going into the movie knowing what to expect. Take Pinocchio's case here. We've got things like the puppet being given life by a fairy, a cricket there to act as his conscience, the living puppet being manipulated into doing wrong, and eventually the puppet's father being swallowed by the whale. These are all things that have been damn near ingrained into the story of Pinocchio, and because of that, for as great as Del Toro's film is, and make no mistakes, it's a wonderfully done film, you know what to expect and can predict some of the things that are going to happen just because of your familiarity with the original story. Now, this isn't to say that it's impossible to do a film based off of these well-known fairy tales and stories and do it well. Disney's kind of made an entire empire on doing just that. But I personally feel like that it either has to be an exceptional version of the tale, or changes something large enough to make it not as connected to the original source. Because Shrek here isn't doing anything that can be connected to any one classical story, instead just using all these characters and ideas in the background, it's allowed to be free from the shackles of, oh, this is just another movie based on the classics, that has kind of harmed some more recent films. Of course, references and crude humor don't make for entertaining media, despite how much a lot of recent TV shows and movies try to convince you otherwise, and Shrek proves it by having one singular theme that runs as the major point from the moment the film starts to its very last note. The fact that appearance isn't important. From the very start, we see just how Shrek is treated by others, and at first he seems to be fine with it. He's the big scary ogre and everyone else is scared of him. There's nothing to question and he's used to this lot in life. It's only after Farquaad starts rounding up all the fairy tale creatures and characters that this gets thrown into question with Donkey. You even see it in the scene itself when Shrek asks Donkey if it bothers him that he's an ogre.
Nope.
Really? You see this clearly in Shrek's reply. He's surprised, taken aback. Here's someone that he's never met before, acting like it doesn't matter who or what Shrek is, not even questioning it. It throws everything that the ogre has ever known into question, and for the rest of the film, he's having to change his own expectations of the other characters as they try to understand what it all means. We continue to see this throughout the film, with more things showing us that we cannot judge based on appearance alone. Lord Farquaad shows this as the camera gives us the initial idea that he's a strong and imposing character, only to reveal his height later on. The dragon shows this by revealing to be a female dragon the entire time and finding attraction to Donkey. Donkey himself shows this to the audience by having a character who is designed and stylized with fairly annoying traits, in this case his never-ending talking, and yet he still makes us like him as a character because he cares for Shrek, Fiona, and the others. In fact, let's talk about Fiona for a moment, because next to Shrek, she is the character that embodies this idea the most. While our green ogre here is dealing with the fact that just because he's ugly doesn't mean he can't find friends and happiness, Fiona on the other hand is seeing things from the other side. That not everything needs to be beautiful or attractive. It really comes to grip for her when she realizes that nothing she's been told or dreamed about having the perfect fairy tale adventure play out before her has actually happened. This only goes further as we see the fact that Fiona isn't all that different from Shrek, giving a large belch after a good meal. This is then followed up by the movie showing the fact that she can fight, as she gets an entire scene by herself to take down Robin Hood and his merry men, something that even Shrek is taken aback by. And while the actual agency and what Fiona is allowed to do in these movies is another video entirely, this continues on to the fact that Shrek is being shown that nothing that he's encountered since the start of the film has gone the way that he is taught life should be. He's an ogre. Everyone should be afraid of him. There shouldn't be anyone cheering or happy to see him, and an ogre never gets the princess. It's for this reason why Shrek falling in love with Fiona, even if it does happen over the span of 2 days a la your classic romantic fairy tales, is so interesting. The fact that she's pretty does nothing for him. Hell, there's a point in the movie where he's trying to figure out how to tell Fiona he likes her, but can't make sense of it himself.
And thought of you because it's pretty and, well, I don't really like it, but I thought you might like it because you're pretty.
This is not a small thing, and not something that I see brought up all that much. Shrek isn't attracted to Fiona because of her looks. He's an ogre, and he's used to the gross and disgusting. And yet here he is, wanting to be with the beautiful princess because of how she acts and their personalities meshing. Now, mind you, the lesson and idea of this movie kind of shoots itself in the foot just a little bit at the end when Fiona becomes an ogre herself, whose own ugliness of a character is something that Shrek finds attractive, but the theme still holds. Perhaps one of the things that gets my attention the most about the film is just the way it goes about in showing us this message. We have had so many other films about the popular kids taking in the unattractive kid and making them up to be beautiful. And let's be entirely honest, that in and of itself isn't a bad lesson, where anyone can be pretty if they want to. But Shrek from the start shows that not only do you not have to follow what the rest of the world is saying, but also shows that conventional attractiveness doesn't matter in the end. That there will be those who will care for you, love you, and share their lives with you regardless if you're a fearsome ogre, a over-talkative donkey, or a magical princess that never actually gets anything to do in her own movies. The film, like the onion that Shrek shows Donkey, has layers to it that I think some people forget it has. And for all the jokes, all the silliness, and the fact that it spawned such a sprawling empire, Shrek as a film teaches a more important lesson than I think anyone really thought it did. It's funny just how deep you can look into a film that has multiple fart jokes in the first few minutes, huh? With all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with the rest of my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.